So what type of preparation or research should somebody do before getting an exotic pet?
Yeah. Honestly, one of the biggest things is calling your exotic veterinarian to say, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting this pet. Can I come in maybe for an initial consult to chat about
That's a good
the
idea.
husbandry of that pet? Or do you have any other resources that you can give me so I can make sure that I know everything before getting them?"
From CareCredit, it's Care Experts, a podcast where we dive deep into the health and pet care industry with the professionals that make it happen. I'm Antonio Diaz, and this is Logan. Maybe you've always dreamed of having a parrot or a bearded dragon, or your kid is begging for a turtle. Exotic pets are exciting, but they're not your typical family pet. Knowing what to expect from daily care to long-term commitment can make all the difference for both you and your animal. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Sydney Pokard, founder of Fauna Vet Collective in Lake Forest, California. She specializes in exotic and small animal medicine and is here today to share what you should consider before adopting an exotic pet. Let's get into it. Dr. Sydney, welcome. So happy to have you here. Tell me, how did you get into working with exotic pets? Is it a specialty
Yeah.
of yours or?
Not yet, sort of.
Okay.
When I was in college, I started volunteering at a zoo,
Okay.
and that was my first taste of, besides owning exotic pets, that was really my first taste of working with exotic animals like reptiles and birds, and I fell in love with it. And so then I knew when I became a veterinarian that I wanted to work with all animals, not just dogs and
Yeah.
cats. I would say that I am very experienced working with exotic pets, and I'm in process of getting board certified working with them.
Okay. So what makes a pet exotic?
Yeah, pretty much it's anything that is a small mammal, bird, or reptile, and not like a dog, cat, or farm animal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some common exotic pets that you see in your practice?
Yeah, common ones are rabbits, guinea pigs, bearded dragons, snakes, cockatiels, parakeets, parrots, all
Okay.
kinds of things.
So what's the most exotic pet that has ever come into your practice or that you've ever cared for?
It wasn't a pet, but the most exotic animal I've ever worked with is something called a binturong.
Okay. What's that?
It's a carnivorous mammal native to South America.
Okay.
They're also known as a bear cat,
Okay.
and they're not very nice, and they smell like buttered popcorn, which is a fun fact about them.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what do they look like?
They look like kind of like a monster.
Really?
they they have really long whiskers, they have really sharp nails, really sharp teeth. They
Okay.
kind of look like a fictional character, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
And how do you pronounce it again?
Binturong.
Binturong.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah.
And what's the smallest animal that has someone has owned or that you've helped care for?
Ooh, a 4-gram frog.
Really?
Yeah. That's the smallest one I've ever
Was
worked
it
with.
what like type of frog was it? Do you know?
A dart frog.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. What's the largest animal that you've ever cared for or that's come into your
The
practice?
largest was about 500-pound African lion.
What?
Yeah.
Was this when you were working with the zoo?
No, actually, so I do a little bit of work with various sanctuaries that
Okay.
have some retired animals
Mm-hmm.
living there. And so this one was one that needed to come in for some care and just like an annual exam.
What was that like for you, that experience?
It's exhilarating. It's
I bet.
always exhilarating to work with an animal like
Yeah.
that because obviously they can hurt you,
Yeah.
not always intentionally, but so you just have to be really on your toes.
Yeah, I would also say too, just the experience of like being that close to them, it's
Amazing.
probably surreal,
Yeah,
right?
it's amazing to be able to work with species like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Were they friendly?
Actually, yes, because this facility did a lot of training with
Hmm.
with their cats. And so this particular lion, yes, was friendly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And besides a guinea pig or a turtle, are there any other small exotic pets that you recommend for a family or children?
Yeah, I would say that species like a leopard gecko
Okay.
or a bearded dragon can actually be great pets, but they still definitely require a lot of work, a
Hmm.
lot of research, special lighting, heat support, special food, things like that.
Okay.
But they tend to be very friendly.
Okay.
And so that's why they can make good pets in a household with kids.
Nice. Good to know.
Yeah.
Do you think that exotic pets are becoming more popular?
I definitely think they are because
Okay.
a lot of people are living in smaller apartments and things like that. They may not have the space for a big dog. And so exotic pets are definitely becoming more popular.
Are iguanas common in that category of exotic pets?
Yes and no. Iguanas definitely require a lot of space once they're fully grown.
Okay.
However, I do see a fair amount of iguanas in
Okay. Yeah,
practice.
I had one years ago in my
Did
late
you?
teens. Yeah.
Oh, that's
I've actually had
awesome.
an iguana and then I had two pet snakes.
Oh, awesome. What
Yeah.
kind of
I
snakes?
had a ball python. He
Nice.
was Jake, that his name was Jake the snake.
Jake the
And then
snake.
I had an adopted actually corn snake. Her name was Strawberry. Yeah, a
Oh,
friend of
I
a
love
friend needed to
that.
rehome her, so I took her
Yeah.
in. And then I ended up actually rehoming them to an exotic pet store. I
Okay.
felt like they were the best fit just because I had gotten dogs and my
Sure.
wife wasn't really comfortable with the snakes, so I figured I'd find them a good home.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah,
that
for
common
sure.
too, where people maybe become overwhelmed or don't know how to properly care for a pet like that?
It definitely does happen because I will say that a lot of people get some exotic pets. It's not always as inherent as to how to take care of them
Yeah.
like it is with dogs and cats. And so it is a common thing where people may want to rehome their exotic pets, unfortunately.
Gotcha. What would be the most important thing somebody should know before owning or adopting an exotic pet?
The husbandry or just unique characteristics of that individual animal.
Mm,
So, as an example, a lot of reptiles require special lighting and special food.
yep.
And if you don't know that ahead of time, then it can be really challenging to take care of them because they can get really sick.
Okay.
And so, just doing your research on how to properly take care of some of these animals is really important.
Is it infrared lighting that they need?
They need UV light.
UV.
Yeah,
Okay.
so UVB light.
Okay.
And they have a natural requirement for that to be able to absorb their food, essentially, and absorb those
Oh,
nutrients.
okay.
So if they're not getting that because they're in natural sunlight 12 hours a day, then we need to mimic that in captivity.
I see. So it's not just like a heating fixture.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So they do need heat support. But as an example, a bearded dragon would live in the Australian desert and they would be in pretty warm temperatures and also getting sunlight throughout the day. So we
Okay.
just need to mimic that for them when they're in a home.
Okay. Are there any species of exotic pets that you would recommend for somebody that's a first-time owner of one?
I would probably say guinea pigs, honestly.
Okay.
I think that because they're mammals, they're a little bit more, some of the characteristics about them are a little bit more natural for a new pet parent to get used to.
I see.
And they're a little bit hardier than some other exotic pets. They don't have like a specific lighting requirement. And so I would say, even though all exotic pets, even though they're small, they still involve a lot of care. But guinea pigs are one of my go to starter pets.
And what would be an exotic pet that you say that people should stay away from as a first-time pet owner?
I would say a chameleon.
Okay.
Chameleons are very fragile. They require definitely a very specific enclosure with specific humidity and misting systems. And so they are a little bit more challenging to take care of.
So what type of preparation or research should somebody do before getting an exotic pet?
Yeah. Honestly, one of the biggest things is calling your exotic veterinarian to say, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting this pet. Can I come in maybe for an initial consult to chat about
That's a good
the
idea.
husbandry of that pet? Or do you have any other resources that you can give me so I can make sure that I know everything before getting them?"
Okay. Do you know, is there a permit or a certain license that somebody needs to obtain before getting a pet like that or any other exotic pet?
Yes, there are. So, any animal that's considered wildlife would need a permit
Okay.
prior to being able to obtain that pet.
Okay.
And the only other exotic pet that is there are any like considerations about really in California would be ferrets
Okay.
because they're technically not legal here.
Oh,
Although
really?
I do see ferrets because I am in the business of taking care of all animals.
I see.
But aside from that, anything that's considered wildlife, you need a permit to quote unquote own them because they are not pets.
Okay. What do exotic pets typically need that people don't expect?
Well, it really depends which kind of animal you're
Okay.
talking about. But I will say a couple of things. Like, for example, if you want a snake, you need to know that they eat things like rodents.
Yes.
And so some people don't know that and they want to be like, oh, I can just feed it like a kibble type food. But no, like, so that may be something that some people are uncomfortable with.
Absolutely. So, what kind of commitment should people expect when it comes to exotic animals? Like, what in terms of frequency of care or
Hmm.
vet visits and even
Yeah.
lifespan?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge range lifespan wise. So, as an example, if you're talking about a parrot, they may live 60 years or
Wow.
more. Or if you're talking about a tortoise, they may live 100 years. And so sometimes you have to like make sure what are you going to do with this animal. They stay in like your family for a long period of
Yeah.
time, or who is that animal going to go to eventually. And so it definitely is a big time and commitment for
Okay.
to take care of some of these animals.
As far as like creating a good habitat
Yeah.
for the animals, what would be some suggestions? For example, like a snake or an iguana or a bearded dragon.
Yeah, absolutely. So making sure they have the right habitat would include the right temperatures, the right lighting for them, but also enrichment. So like branches and things that they can hide under and ways that they can get exercise. And of course, an enclosure that's big enough for them to do all of those things in.
What's the typical recommendation? Because I know, for example, like iguanas will typically grow as big as their enclosure allows them
Hmm.
to. Is that right?
Hmm. Yeah, it can be. Many times, if they're in too small of an enclosure, it'll stunt their growth a
Hmm.
bit. And so, basically, a lot of these animals need to be able to get enough exercise within their enclosure, unless you are taking them out and providing them with some other secure outdoor space or room for them to exercise.
Okay. What does exercise look like for a snake or an iguana or
Yeah.
even like a parrot?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a reptile, it may just look like having enough space to climb up something or
Okay.
slither up something. So that way they can work on those muscles and just have movement and go to different locations.
Okay.
Something like a parrot, for example, may be that they have a secure room where they can fly around, or even an outdoor enclosure that is safe for them to fly around
Okay.
in. If not, then it would just be somewhere that they can also climb and get a little bit more exercise besides just staying in a
Okay.
cage the whole time.
Do you recommend that they get out frequently to free roam?
Only if they have a safe enough space.
Okay.
So, kind of my general rule is if you cannot provide them with outdoor space or outside of their cage that is secure and safe enough for them, then it would be better that they just stay in their enclosures. However, the enclosure needs to be big enough to house them.
Okay. And how often should a person bring their pet snake or exotic pet to the vet? A yearly
Yeah.
checkup or 6 months?
I would recommend yearly at minimum.
Okay.
And as they start to get older, then every 6 months.
Okay. What are you
Yeah.
looking for with an exotic pet?
I do a full physical exam, so nose to tail, basically, same
Yeah.
as I would for a dog and a cat. I check their eyes, ears, mouth, their heart, lungs, and skin, basically everything. We also review husbandry. We review their enclosure, their diet, basically every consideration with them. And many times we'll also do blood work, x rays, and a fecal test.
Okay. And anything that people should know about, for example, any signs or symptoms of illness that they need to bring their pet to the vet right away?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing is weight loss. And
Okay.
so if you do have an exotic pet, I generally will recommend keeping like a little kitchen scale at home or even like a smaller baby or cat scale so you can weigh them frequently
Okay.
because they are notorious for hiding their injuries and illnesses. And so weight loss is like the first clue.
Okay.
Also, if they haven't eaten, that's a big one as well.
Gotcha. But a snake, for example, eats, if I'm not mistaken, weekly,
Yeah,
right?
once a week
Okay.
typically. Yep, once a week typically. So let's say they refuse one meal. Well, then I want to know a little bit more. Like, has the weight stayed the same or
Hmm.
has it dropped? Is there anything else that's changed in the enclosure?
Okay.
It may not be an emergency to bring them in right away if they've lost or if they've not eaten a singular meal, but let's say they haven't eaten the next meal. Now it's been several weeks since they haven't eaten and they're also losing weight. Then there may be something else going on.
Okay. Do exotic pets bond with their owners in the way that cats or dogs do?
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
Really?
there are a lot of, I even have a rabbit, and I would say that he's very bonded with,
Okay.
well, technically my husband over me a little bit, but no, they definitely have. Each of them have very unique personalities. Birds are also notorious for being very bonded with their
Okay.
owners.
How about
Yeah.
reptiles?
They can also bond. I mean, I would
Really?
say bearded dragons have a very unique personality too.
Okay.
And I get owners that come in with their bearded dragons and they are so calm and happy to just sit on their shoulder and hang out.
That's interesting. What advice would you give first-time exotic pet owners?
Definitely do your research. That's the
Mm,
biggest thing I can say is that they're not just easy to take care of. They
yeah.
each have a really unique makeup and a lot of things that they need care wise. So do
Yeah.
your
I
research.
would agree. I think a lot of times too, and honestly, I'm guilty of it. Back in the day, I think it was a cool thing to do to have a snake, you
Yeah,
know, and an iguana, and then I quickly realized that it was a little bit more than I had thought would be required of me for
sure.
care, you know. So I think that's important for people to realize. Like, it's not just a status symbol or like a cool thing. Like, these are living animals that need care,
100%.
and to know like what they need to thrive and live a good life.
Yeah, a hundred
So
percent. Just because they don't have like kind of the same behaviors as a dog, like whining or things like that, where you're
yeah,
like, oh, they must need something.
yeah,
They still have a lot of feelings.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Sydney, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Yeah,
me.
my pleasure. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't leave yet. I just want to say, if you want to hear more about health and pet care, check out these episodes of Care Experts. Also, before you go, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. New episodes drop every Wednesday. You don't want to miss it.